My name is Anthony, and at 73 years old I learned the hard way that taking care of your health is not something you can put off for later. When I was young, I was the type of person who boasted about never having set foot in a doctor's office. Strong as an ox, I used to tell my children, while lifting heavy boxes in the grocery store I managed in the Bronx neighborhood of New York City. I remember it like it was yesterday. I had just turned 45 when I started feeling that nagging pain in my back. It's normal, I thought. Hard work does that to you. I'd take an anti-inflammatory and keep going. My wife, Helen, was always insisting that I see a doctor, but I always responded with that mischievous smile. Doctors are for sick people, woman. Time went by, and that little back pain started to keep company with other small discomforts, the blood pressure that sometimes went up, but I only found out when I went to the pharmacy to measure it by chance. The fatigue that increased even with the simplest tasks, and that constant thirst that I quenched by drinking several glasses of water throughout the day. It was on a Sunday morning, during a family lunch, that my world turned upside down. I was there cutting a piece of meat when suddenly I felt a strong dizziness and fell off the chair. My children ran to help me, and for the first time in my life, I couldn't say no to the ambulance they called. At the hospital came the diagnosis that changed my life: advanced type 2 diabetes, uncontrolled high blood pressure, and a herniated disc that was already seriously compromising my spine. The doctor was straightforward. "Mr. Anthony, you're reaping years of neglect with your health." It was a slap in the face, the kind that wakes you up. I discovered that if I had done regular checkups, all these conditions could have been diagnosed and treated early. Diabetes, for example, had been giving signs for years with that constant thirst and fatigue. High blood pressure was silently damaging my organs, and the back pain, which I ignored so much, now required surgery. I had to relearn how to live. First, it was the change in diet. No more pastries for breakfast or that plate full of rice at lunch. Helen, my life partner, transformed into a true chef of healthy eating. At first, I admit I looked suspiciously at those colorful plates with vegetables. But today, I can't live without my varied leaf salad and my grilled food. I started taking walks, first short ones, around the square near home. In the first few days, I could barely make a complete lap without stopping to rest. Today, I participate in the Senior Citizens Walk group 3 times a week, and we've even completed a 5-kilometer run. Who would have thought, me, old Anthony, with a running medal hanging on the living room wall? I learned the importance of measuring glucose regularly, taking medications at the right times, and doing routine exams. I have a folder where I write down all my medical appointments: cardiologist, endocrinologist, orthopedist. I've become a true professional at taking care of my health. But you know what hurts the most? It's seeing my friends my age repeating the same mistakes I made. Just the other day, my buddy Joe was complaining about chest pains, but refused to go to the doctor. I took him by the arm and said, "Buddy, let me tell you a story. Today, at 73, I'm a different man. Of course, I have my limitations. The herniated disc still bothers me on rainy days, and I need to be disciplined with diabetes. But I have quality of life. I can play with my grandchildren, take my walks, and I even started dancing with Helen again at Sunday dances. If I could go back in time and give advice to 40-year-old Anthony, I'd say, boy, take care of yourself. That checkup you avoid so much can give you more years of life with those you love. Don't wait for pain to turn into suffering before seeking help. Health is like a savings account. The earlier you start investing, the better the result will be down the road." Today, when I see young people repeating my mistakes, I make a point of sharing my story. Some listen to me, others give that same smile I used to give, but at least I try to do my part. And you who are reading my story, don't wait until you're 73 to learn this lesson. The best time to take care of your health is now, whether you're young or old. Because, as that saying I learned late in life goes, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. After I learned to take care of my health, I realized I had another challenge ahead: finances. You know, when you're a grocery store owner, like I was for 35 years, you think you'll always have money coming in. The business is guaranteed, I used to say, while putting some bills in my apron pocket for the day's expenses. I remember the day my son Richard, who's an accountant, sat with me at the kitchen table and asked, "Dad, how much do you have saved for retirement?" I gave that awkward laugh and replied, "Son, I have the grocery store. As long as I have strength, I'll work." That's when he opened my eyes. Dad, what about when you can't work 12 hours a day anymore? What if you need expensive medical treatment? Social Security barely covers basic bills these days. That conversation struck a chord with me. The same week, I had to replace the refrigerator in the store, an unexpected expense of almost $5,000. For the first time, I realized I didn't have an emergency fund. Everything that came in practically went out. Helen, always more cautious, had her own safe, a cookie tin where she kept some savings. It's for emergencies, she used to say. Little did I know that Cookie Tin would be wiser than all my financial decisions up to that point. With Richard's help, we started organizing the stores and household accounts. First lesson I learned: separate business money from personal money. Seems obvious, but how many small business owners like me mix everything up? It was as if the grocery store was a big piggy bank where I took money as I needed it. We created a simple system. Every day, when closing the cash register, I separated the money into envelopes, one for restocking merchandise, another for fixed bills, another for emergencies, and so on. At first, it was difficult. Seeing the money there and not being able to use it as I wanted was like having water in front of you and not being able to drink. But you know what motivated me? It was when Richard showed me a simple calculation. Dad, if you save $500 a month, in 5 years, you'll have $30,000, not counting interest. That lit a bulb. I started to see each saved coin as a little brick to build my future. Gradually, I learned about investments. First, a savings account, basic but safe. Then, with more knowledge, some fixed income investments. Richard helped me understand that I didn't need to be an economics expert to make money grow. One of the most important decisions was to get health insurance. It's expensive, I thought, but I remembered my hospitalization for diabetes and how difficult it would have been to pay everything out of pocket. That's when I understood that some expenses are not costs, they're investments. The grocery store began to prosper even more when I started managing inventory and purchases better. It wasn't about working more, but working smarter. I started using a little notebook, later migrated to the computer with help from the grandkids, to control everything that came in and went out. At 60, I made a decision that seemed impossible before. I started preparing the transition of the store. My youngest son, Pete, showed interest in continuing the business, but in his own way, more modern. Instead of resisting, we made a plan. In 5 years, he would take over completely, and I would receive a part of the monthly profits. Today, at 73, I can say I have a peaceful retirement. I'm not rich, but I have security. The grocery store, in Pete's hands, has turned into a modern mini-market, and that percentage we agreed on ensures an important extra income. The money I saved over the years has already saved me in various situations. When I needed to have herniated disc surgery, I had reserves to choose a good doctor. When Helen wanted to remodel the kitchen, we didn't need to go into debt. To friends my age who still haven't organized themselves, I always say, it's never too late to start. Of course, the earlier the better, but the important thing is to take the first step. Sometimes I see acquaintances who retired and depend exclusively on Social Security, having to count pennies at the end of the month. That breaks my heart. One of the greatest joys is being able to help the grandchildren with college and see that they're already growing up with a financial mindset that I only had after 50. Sophie, my oldest granddaughter, at just 15, already has her own savings account. As I always say, money doesn't bring happiness, but the lack of it can bring a lot of worry. Organizing finances isn't about getting rich. It's about having peace of mind to enjoy life without fear of tomorrow. You know, after learning about the importance of health and organizing finances, I realized there was something even more valuable that needed care: my relationships. I confess this was one of the hardest lessons to learn, especially for a man of my generation, raised to be strong and not show feelings. It all started when my great friend Sam passed away about 5 years ago. We had been friends since youth, but in recent years we barely spoke. There was always an excuse: too much work at the store, family commitments, the New York traffic that only got worse. When I received the news of his death, I felt as if a piece of my history had gone without me being able to say goodbye properly. It was a wake-up call. How many other friends was I letting slip through my fingers? I started making a mental list. Jack, who played dominoes with me on Sundays. Charlie, my neighbor of 30 years who moved upstate. Even my brother Joe, who I only saw at family gatherings. Helen, my lifelong companion, always told me, "Anthony, friendship is like a plant, it needs water every day." But I, stubborn as I always was, replied that true friendship didn't need maintenance. What a mistake. Of course it did, and how it did. I decided to do things differently. I started with something simple. Every Wednesday after my morning walk, I started having coffee at the diner with Jack. At first, we sat there, a bit awkward, talking only about the weather and the Yankees game. But gradually the conversations became deeper. I discovered he was also fighting diabetes, and our exchanges of experiences about diet and exercise brought us even closer. My son Richard, seeing my change, introduced me to WhatsApp. I confess that at first I thought it was nonsense. What's this thing for? I have a phone at home. But when I managed to make a video call with my brother Joe, who lives in Florida, and saw his face after so long, I understood the power of this technology. I created a WhatsApp group with old friends from the neighborhood. I called it Bronx Bunch. Every day someone sends a message, an old photo, a joke, some a bit inappropriate, I admit. It's like we've gone back in time, but with the wisdom that only years can give us. Helen also got into it. We started attending the senior center here near home. At first, I went reluctantly. Old folks' place, I thought. But what a surprise. I met people with incredible stories to share. We made new friends, and we even started participating in ballroom dancing classes on Thursdays. One of the greatest joys was getting closer to the grandkids. Before, I barely knew the names of the games they played or the music they listened to. Now, I make a point of participating. Of course, I still find today's music too noisy, but seeing their smile when I show interest in their world is priceless. Pete, my youngest son who took over the store, had a brilliant idea. Create a coffee space in the back of the shop. "Dad, the old customers miss talking to you," he said. Now, every afternoon, that space becomes a meeting point. Customers of years stop by for coffee, tell their stories, and I keep alive that connection that was always the heart of the business. I also learned the importance of asking for help. The other day I was having trouble setting up my new cell phone. Instead of setting it aside, as I would have done before, I asked my granddaughter Sophie for help. We spent a whole afternoon together, her teaching me patiently and me telling stories from my youth. It was a precious moment of connection between generations. With Helen, our relationship gained new life. After 45 years of marriage, we discovered we still had a lot to learn from each other. We started having our Thursday dates. After dance class, we go for a special coffee, just the two of us, as if we were dating. But it's not all roses. I lost some friends along the way, others moved far away. The difference is that now I don't let distance be an excuse. I make video calls, send messages, and when I can, I visit. As Jack says, we only really die when we're forgotten. One of the most important lessons I learned is that it's never too late to strengthen bonds or create new ones. Just last week, I met Mr. Manuel, a Portuguese man who attends the same water aerobics class as me. We discovered we have similar immigration stories, and now we meet every week to play cards and tell tales. Today, at 73, my life is much richer in relationships than it was at 50. I have friends of all ages, from different places and stories. Each conversation, each meeting, each message exchanged is a treasure that I cherish. And you know what's most beautiful? Seeing how these relationships created a support network. When Helen needed surgery last year, we weren't alone for a single day. There was always someone to help, bring food, keep company. That's priceless. Change. That little 5-letter word used to scare me so much. I, Anthony, was always the type who likes things his way in their place. If it's working, why change it, was my motto. But life has a funny way of teaching us that the only constant is change. I remember as if it were today when Pete, my son, came with the idea of computerizing the grocery store. "Dad, we need a computer to control inventory, process cards, issue electronic invoices." I almost had a fit. For 35 years, I had controlled everything with my black-covered notebook, knew every product, every price by heart. "A computer will just complicate everything," I complained. Helen, who was already more tuned in than me because of her internet classes at the senior center, told me something I'll never forget. "Anthony, the world doesn't stop spinning just because we want to stand still." It was hard to swallow, but she was right, as always. The first week with the computer in the store was a disaster. I typed with one finger, took half an hour to find the letters on the keyboard, and when I finally managed, I'd get the price or quantity wrong. Younger customers tried to hide their laughter, while the older ones looked at me with that, "Well, Mr. Anthony, you've fallen for it too" face. But you know what I discovered? That learning something new, even when it seems impossible, makes us feel alive. My granddaughter Sophie, at just 15, became my private technology teacher. She had the patience of a saint. "Grandpa, click here. No, you don't need to press so hard. That's it, now drag the mouse slowly." Gradually, that seven-headed monster became an ally. I discovered that the computer showed me exactly what was selling more, what needed restocking, even the best time to have promotions. In 6 months, the store was more organized than ever. But technology was just the beginning of the changes. The biggest one came when the doctor said our 2-story house was no longer safe for us. "Mr. Anthony, these stairs are a risk. With your arthritis and Mrs. Helen's high blood pressure, you need to think about moving to a more suitable place. Move from the house where we raised our children, where every corner had a story, where the door frame had the children's growth marks." "Never," was my first response. Helen also resisted at first. After all, it was 40 years of memories. It was on a Sunday afternoon, after almost falling down the stairs while changing a light bulb, that it hit me. I sat with Helen on the porch, and we started making a list. Pros and cons of staying in the house. The cons were winning. Dangerous stairs, yard too big to maintain, bathrooms without adaptations, distance from the health clinic. Our children helped us find a ground-floor apartment in a condominium near the senior center. It was smaller, of course, but had everything adapted for our age. Support bars in the bathroom, non-slip flooring, 24-hour doorman. Most importantly, it was close to the children and the grocery store, now run by Pete. The move was a process. Each object we packed brought a memory, a story. Some things were hard to leave behind, but we learned to keep what matters in our hearts. And you know what? The new apartment brought a freedom we didn't expect. Less space to clean means more time to live. With the move came other adjustments. I learned to use ride-sharing apps on my phone. Goodbye parking worries. I discovered the convenience of online shopping, especially for heavy things like water and rice. Even medical consultations by video call, something I would have sworn I'd never do, became part of the routine. One of the most important adaptations was learning to accept help. When I was younger, I prided myself on doing everything alone. Now I understand that accepting help doesn't make us weaker. On the contrary, it makes us wiser. Whether it's support from our children for important decisions, help from a housekeeper to keep the home in order, or even the support of a cane on days when arthritis flares up. Technology, which once frightened me so much, became a precious ally. Through WhatsApp, I maintained daily contact with my family. On Facebook, I reconnected with childhood friends. On YouTube, I learned recipes adapted for diabetics and exercises to do at home. Who would have thought that I, at 73 years old, would be doing live streams with my grandchildren? Of course, not all changes are easy. Recently, I had to start using a hearing aid. At first, the resistance was strong. "I'm not deaf, people just speak too softly," I would say. But after missing half the conversations at Sunday lunch and seeing the frustration on my grandchildren's faces when they had to repeat everything 3 times, I realized it was time to accept this change too. Mary Helen says I've become a different man. More flexible, she says, with that smile that has won me over for 45 years. And you know what? She's right. I've learned that resisting change is like swimming against the current. It's very tiring and doesn't get us anywhere. Today, when I meet friends my age resisting necessary changes, I try to share my experience. I tell them how each adaptation, although scary at first, ended up bringing more quality to life. As I always say, we may not have a choice about getting older, but we do have a choice about how we age. When I handed over the keys to the grocery store for my son Peter to take over completely, I felt a huge void. For 35 years, that place had been my life. Waking up early, opening the doors, greeting customers, organizing the shelves. Suddenly, I found myself without that routine that defined me. Now, who is Anthony? I would ask myself every morning when I woke up. The first months of retirement were difficult, I won't deny it. Even having planned financially, even having the security of an income, there was something that no money could buy. The feeling of being useful, of having a purpose. Mary Helen noticed my restlessness. One day she found me on the balcony of the new apartment, staring into space. "Anthony," she said, "you've spent your whole life taking care of the grocery store. Now it's time to take care of life." But what life would that be? The children were already raised, the grocery store in good hands, and I had plenty of time. That's when I began to realize that having free time didn't mean having an empty life. It was an opportunity to fill it with things I never had time to do before. It started by chance. One day at the community center, I heard a lady complaining that she couldn't use her cell phone to talk to her grandchildren. I remembered how my granddaughter Sophie had taught me patiently, and I offered to help. To my surprise, I discovered I had a knack for teaching. Soon we formed an informal technology for the Golden Age group. Seeing someone's eyes light up when they managed to make their first video call with a distant child gave me an inexplicable joy. It wasn't just about technology. It was about connecting people, about giving back independence to those who felt lost in this digital world. But what really changed my perspective was when I started participating in the Living Memory project at the neighborhood library. The idea was simple. Elderly people told their stories to children. I started by sharing my memories of the grocery store, how the neighborhood had changed, the old traditions of the immigrants. To my surprise, those children were fascinated. They wanted to know what life was like without the internet, how an old grocery store worked, how people communicated before cell phones. Suddenly, my experiences, which I thought were ordinary, had value. They were part of the living history of the neighborhood. Mary Helen also found her way. She started teaching traditional Portuguese recipes to a group of young people at the community center. Seeing my wife at 70, teaching young men and women how to make bacalhau à Gomes de Sá fills me with pride. She always says, "It's not just about the food, it's about passing on our history." One of the greatest joys came when Peter asked me to be a consultant at the grocery store, now a modern mini-market. "Dad, we need to maintain the essence of the service you always had, even with all the technology." So, twice a week, I go there to train new employees. I teach not only about products, but about how to create that special connection with customers that has always been our trademark. I also discovered the pleasure of being a full-time grandfather. Before, I was always too busy with the grocery store. Now I can dedicate quality time to my grandchildren. With Sophie, I learn about technology. With Lucas, the youngest, I play video games. Yes, I learned. And listen to his school stories. With Mary Claire, the middle one, I share my new hobby, digital photography. Photography, by the way, was an incredible discovery. It started when I received a digital camera from my children for Christmas. At first, I only took basic family photos, but gradually, I started photographing the neighborhood, documenting its changes, its characters. I created a personal project, Memories of Bras in Images. Today, I have a small collection that tells the story of the neighborhood through my lens. On Wednesday mornings, I participate in a group of volunteers that helps bedridden elderly people. We keep them company, read books, sometimes just talk. It's impressive how we can make a difference in someone's life just by being present. Every smile I receive is a reminder that I still have much to offer. One of the most rewarding things was starting to write my memoirs. Not to publish, but to leave a record for the family. I began by telling about my parents' arrival from Portugal, my childhood in Bras, how I met Mary Helen, the history of the grocery store. The grandchildren love it when I read excerpts at Sunday lunches. I learned that purpose has no age. Each phase of life brings new opportunities to be useful, to make a difference. Sometimes they are small gestures, like helping a neighbor with their online shopping or teaching an old recipe to a young person. Other times, they are bigger projects, like volunteer work or recording the history of the neighborhood. Today, at 73, I wake up every morning with a schedule full of meaning. Not the rush of old times, but commitments I chose to have, people I chose to help, moments I chose to live. The grocery store taught me a lot about work and dedication, but this new phase is teaching me about the value of each moment, each encounter, each shared smile. As I say to my friends at the community center, we're not too old to dream, to learn, to contribute. On the contrary, we have the wisdom of years lived and the privilege of time to make a difference in others' lives. And there is no greater purpose than that.